Here we go. Welcome everyone to the Living Trophies Master Zoom class. It's really amazing to believe that we started back in April and we're still going strong here in November. I'm a firm believer that the most intrinsically motivated people are often the most successful. Keep being intentional about your development, personal, professional, spiritual, and emotional development. You can go to the Kevin Sutton on YouTube and subscribe to the Living Trophies, and you can watch all the past presentations that are logged there. And we're doing some tremendous things, and the people that have been participating on a regular basis have continued to grow and share their stories. But with tonight, we are beginning a new series. And that new series is, and I'm extremely excited about, the new series is called The Next Generation of Influences. Tonight, we want to look at the agent market, the role and the influence. Our moderator for tonight is my long-term friend, Odell McCants. And Odell and I have had a rich history together. We both went to play for Stu Vetter at Flint Hill, and he's had a rich history in this industry. So I want to turn it over to Odell, and he can introduce our two presenters tonight. And just super excited, man, about, Jim, Tanner, and Mason Ashe. So we want to turn it over to Odell, and then we just want to, move forward with tonight's show.
Well, thank you, Coach Sutton, and I commend you for bringing together two esteemed agents. And as a former player agent myself, I know it's not easy getting two of y'all in the same room or on the same Zoom. but
it's not like that.
Are men that Mason, I've gotten to know, and Jim, we don't know each other personally, but I've always admired your work. And just a little bit of background here. Mason Ashe. Mason is partner in recently launched Unlimited Sports, which is a global basketball sports agency. And he's also the president and CEO of Ashe Sports Entertainment Consulting. And prior to Ashe Sports Entertainment, Mason was a co-founder with his former business partner, Bill Strickland, of Strickland and Ashe Management. And Mason has also been a vice president of the team division at IMG. And Mason has a 30-year sports and entertainment law career where he's led contract negotiations and been a legal advisor and a brand strategist for not just athletes, but entertainers as well. And Mason's been recognized as 2015 Sports Lawyer of the Year by the National Bar Association and been listed as the 101 most influential minorities in sports by Sports Illustrated. In addition to his client work, Mason is an adjunct professor at the Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania, Georgetown University, and Howard University. And Jim Tanner is president of Tandem Sports and Entertainment, which Jim founded after serving as a partner at global law firm Skadden Arps and Williams & Connolly. And I know it was at Williams & Connolly where I, and probably many of you, got to know and follow Jim's work representing athletes such as Tim Duncan and Grant Hill and Ray Allen. And today at Tandem, Jim's clients include Ja Morant, Jeremy Lin, Tamika Catchings, amongst just a few. And Jim's clients, in addition to NBA and WNBA players, also include MLB players and coaches and broadcasters. And Mason and Jim, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
So Mason, as a Black agent, former agent, I've always looked to you as an OG, man. You and Bill Strickland. And
I've never liked that phrase, but go ahead.
but Mason, it's not to really date anything. I think it's not sad, but it's a statement that you all, it wasn't that long ago that you were OGs, really paving the way for many of us. And as you look back on your career, what were some of the early challenges that you faced as an agent? And then how have you seen those challenges or the business evolve?
Well, shoot, in the beginning, I came out of law school in 1989. It happened to be a trend that was just developing where Black agents were starting to get interviews with top picks in the draft. Prior to that, it was very difficult if you were a Black agent to even get an interview, even with a Black player that was a lottery pick or something like that, an early first round pick. We definitely weren't getting interviews with white players. It just so happened though in the late 80s, people like Purvis Ellison started, he picked Bill Strickland. He was the #1 pick in 1987. Barry Sanders picked the Black agent. Even people like Spike Lee picked a black lawyer for his film lawyer. And all of a sudden, this sort of trends began where the players started putting pressure on each other to open up the opportunities. And so I just happened to come out of school in '89, right around that time. But in the beginning, it was difficult to get black or white clients to even take us seriously because we didn't look like what they thought the image of an agent was, you know? And so that was the original difficulty, was just getting a meeting. And then when you got a meeting, then you had to prove, you know, with no clients that you could do the work. They got to give you the benefit of the doubt. You could be a licensed attorney, but so what? You know, you're really trying to compete with big firms or big law firms. And so it was a little bit difficult, but I had to realize that, you know, you got to start small. So I basically did a little 5-hour radius at Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and started going to HBCUs and some of the SEC and ACC schools and represented late round draft picks in the beginning to get some experience, you know. And once I did that, they brought me to their teammates and their friends and what have you that ended up becoming bigger draft picks.
Great. So, you know, when it comes to recruiting for you coaches here or, you know, on the call, you know, I believe that it's really important to know who you are and what your program is and what you and your program stand for. And for you, Jim, you know, I really believe that you've done a great job in that in your business of the clients you work with. How have you gone about you know, identifying what it is your brand stands for, what you stand for, and then identifying potential clients and clients who fit that model?
Sure. So what I would say is that, you know, I started my career as an attorney doing corporate law at Skadden Arps and did that for about 4 years. Didn't find it, you know, particularly rewarding working for these huge corporations. I missed kind of the personal touch. So I transitioned into sports and went to another Williams and Conley in '97. And I was there to join a partner, Lon Babby, who had already started a practice. And so he had Grant Hill was the first client that he had, and Grant's father had really directed Grant to a law firm, and, you know, he had played in the NFL and had a very successful football career, had experiences with agents, and said, we're going to do it a little bit differently and use a sports attorney instead. So that was really the start for me. I came in to help him and then grew the practice from there. But Grant was our first client, so he was kind of iconic in terms of how we defined what we wanted to be associated with. And, you know, Grant is just a great player, but also a great person off the court as well. So we've always said that that's who we wanted to be associated with. So we were lucky to be able to build upon that and to get guys like Tim Duncan and Ray Allen and Jeremy Lin and Vince Carter and some of the guys that we've worked with. So it's about, for us, identifying not only great players, but also great people. The other thing I'll say is that, you know, I'm sure we're going to talk about recruiting, you know, a little bit more in the future, but as far as recruiting is concerned, we tend to gravitate towards a certain type of player and family, and they tend to gravitate towards me and to our organization based on the way that we do things. So there are similarities in terms of outlook and approach and some of the things that resonate with them and some of the things that resonate with us. So it's kind of like self-selection in terms of who we appeal to and who appeals to us. So it's, you know, it's really important to me, though, to be associated with the right types of players. You know, it's like you don't want to be a revolving door. You don't want to get the wrong guys where they fire you after a very short period of time. You want to have a very long-term relationship with those clients and serve them not only as when they're players, but also when they transition into whatever their second career is. And so, you know, picking the right guys and having the right character up front is really important.
So to both of you, when we talk about the recruiting process as an agent, when you're recruiting college players who will be rookies, what's important to you in the relationship between the agent and the coach, or what is that interaction like in a way that parents can make those educated decisions on who to select? Coaches can feel confident that they or their programs aren't going to be put to compromising positions. And then you, finally, the agent, can do your best in representing the athlete.
Mm-hmm. What I would say, let me go first. What I would say is that, I mean, there are two types of programs and two types of coaches. There are coaches that, in my mind, have the benefit of the player at front of mind, and they're doing everything they can to kind of help direct the player to the right agent. and the right choices, like, like Kevin has done in the past that we were talking about before. There are some coaches that, I think they mean well, but they also are trying to protect the program more so than offering guidance to the player. And so I think those are the programs that I find most frustrating, because what they do is they'll tell the good agents who are trying to follow the rules, they'll say, like, stay away, don't talk to the player, don't talk to his family until the end of the year, and then we'll have a process and we'll bring you in at that point. You sit around waiting until the end of the year, and and then you read about the player signing with an agent, and it's like, what happened? And so that's not really helpful either. I mean, I think that those programs and coaches that kind of bring everything into the light, give equal access to everyone. So invite agents to practice, give them opportunity to meet the player and the family, like keep everything in the light. That's how you really keep a program clean. And that's how you end up, giving a player the right types of options to choose from in terms of agents and representation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I've seen the extremes, like a Dean Smith would have, he would select 3 or 4 agents, and then you'd have to meet in his office, and he'd have his lawyer and his accountant with him to help decipher whatever you're trying to pitch to the family and the player. And he didn't want other meetings outside, on campus or anywhere else. That was one extreme. And it worked for a lot of years for his guys. At least he knew who they were meeting. He knew what they were being pitched. And that's one very restrictive way to do it. But it does work if you have big time players. I would say the other extreme is where the coaches say, I don't have anything to do with this at all, and leave it up to the player and the family to kind of fend off, 100 phone calls and 50 agents who don't have clients or don't have any experience. It becomes a very big circus. So there's got to be something in the middle where I think if a coach or in working in tandem with the compliance office can at least help the player meet big firm, mid-sized firm, boutique or solo practitioner, so they can see the differences and at least have meetings with those kind of varieties that are there on campus, like Jim said, in the light. But when you just don't get involved at all, or if you try to block and say the player has to go with your agent and that's the only person you have time to vet, then it's really, then you're creating another kind of a situation where agents are going to force their way on. They're going to hide behind the bleachers and meet in dorms and, follow guys behind trees and what have you. It doesn't really have to be like that. I think you should open up practice. You should let the players see who these people are, and agents who are trustworthy, or at least that are competent, don't mind being seen in the light. They'll come to practice. They'll sit there and let you screen them. They don't mind meeting in the coach's office with the coach listening to what's going on. It's the ones that don't want to be scrutinized by the family or the coach is who you got to be worried about.
Yeah, and I know that was always my approach. It was really important for me to have the relationship with the coach so that they understood my work, who I was as a person, and that when you do see me at a game or on your campus, you don't have to worry about your program, yourself being put into a compromising situation. Almost to your point, Jim, sometimes to my detriment, I lost out on some things by following those rules. But at the end of the day, now that I'm not on the player side, I still have my name that I can be a part of a program like this we have tonight.
Absolutely.
So again, to both of you, Mason and Jim, how can coaches best prepare their players for professional basketball, not necessarily from a skills and fundamental standpoint, but just a knowledge of the game and also off the court?
So I think that, having master classes like this is a good, way to do it. I mean, of course, we're doing this virtually now because of COVID, but I would say it's not a bad idea to have. I've even seen NBA teams do that. They've invited me in on a after practice to talk to the pro players about some particular topic that's on the business side of sports. If you think about it, players don't often get that kind of conversation, from somebody that knows what they're talking about, at least. So having master classes with experts that are in an area periodically throughout the season gives players a chance to think about the business side of it. Because if they didn't major in sports management, you're just assuming that they're going to learn what a union is. I've had guys drafted and didn't even know what a players union was or what they did or how to engage them or should you go to the meetings. should you vote? Should you be involved? If you're a rookie, do you have a say-so? Is it just the veteran players that are going to control the business? So just kind of really having those kind of sessions where you bring somebody in that maybe talks about certain topics. It might be about private banking. It might, and not giving them financial advice, but explaining to them who the service providers are going to be if you decide to go professional. If you have the opportunity and privilege to play professional ball, who are going to be your service providers? What does an insurance agent do? What does a private banker do? What does a lawyer do that's different? What if your agent is a lawyer? Do you still let that person do everything? I mean, so those kind of distinctions a player usually they don't get that kind of a training.
I agree with everything in that answer. The only thing I would add to that is that I think it's got to be education not only for the player but for the family, for the parents, because a lot of times the parents can undermine what's best for the player just because they don't know. And so the earlier that the coaches can educate the parents in terms of agents, the market, how things work, how the rules are, the sooner they can do that, the better, so that the parents aren't working at cross purposes for what's best for the player. So I totally agree with everything that Mason said. The other thing I would say is, like, to help them kind of get ready for being professionals is to make sure that they understand that they're always being watched. They're always being scrutinized. So it's not just what they do, during, the regulation time of a game, but it's also, what are they doing in terms of preparation for the game? What are they doing after the game? What are they doing when they're on the bench? Making sure they understand that, these NBA teams are going to go and talk to their academic advisors. They're going to talk to professors. They're going to talk to classmates. They're going to know everything about that player. And so, you got to realize these teams are making multi-million-dollar decisions. And so they want to know as much as they possibly can. And so these players need to understand from day one that they're being watched.
Yes. I have I'm sorry.
I was going to say, just to add to that, now we got a whole new world beginning with this name, image, and likeness, right? So if you got college players all of a sudden being able to market their images and their names, so now, and run a business, right, of their own, I don't know how far, I don't think anybody knows yet whose responsibilities are going to be to help the player now not just learn about being drafted, but while you're in school, setting up an enterprise, a marketing, innovation sort of company startup that while you're a student, is that the coach's responsibility? Or who is that? Who's going to really help the player find a business lawyer to incorporate them, find a marketing person to help them understand about brand partnerships? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're talking about, that's a whole nother ball of wax, really. And I don't know that that's the head coach's job. I don't know. We don't know. And some coaches don't want players to know their value anyway. They don't want them too early to realize what their value is. I go all the way back with football. At Bama one time, I had a player way back in the early 90s, and their coach Stallings, he didn't really like players even getting insurance, because if they got that liability insurance, $1 million liability, the player starts thinking they're worth $1 million. They may not play the same. They might play a little tentative now because they realize their value is sort of great. So back then, old school coaches didn't necessarily want the players knowing what their value is, and so now the values, of course, have increased, how many folds. So it's a tough business. I understand it. And it's a tough thing to enlighten a player who may otherwise be innocent to some of this business side that is going to have a huge upside. But how much do you want them to know? That's a pretty difficult judgment call.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I want to get back to NIL, because I know that is definitely something that coaches need to understand and have a plan for. I'm going to go back to the client relationship here and parallel it, I guess, to or compare it to coaches. When you have coaches have a first year player, it's really important to have the player understand what the culture and standards are of that program, and knowing how intimate the business relationship, the player agent relationship is. How do you all go about that kind of I guess orientation? I know it's not always easy for when you bring on a client, for them to understand what your expectations are in the relationship.
I'll let you go, Jim. That's not easy.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough question because part of the thing is that it's so hard to recruit players. That's the hardest part of the business. The representation is like once you know what you're doing and have experience, that's not difficult. It's recruiting. So there's all this other crap going on in terms of how people acquire clients that I'm not really addressing. But it's hard to get a client, especially hard to get a premier client, right? So when you get them, you've got this dance, right? You want to establish standards. You want to make sure that you're educating them. You want to like hold them accountable, but you're also in some ways, you're cautious, right? Because you don't want to do anything that gives somebody else that's going to be in his ear, a leg up or a reason to say, well, get rid of this guy and, hire me. But at the end of the day, like, one thing is that you have to be willing to speak truth to power. You can't be afraid of losing your job. You can't let that stop you from doing your job. And so, I'll never forget like once, and, this was a while ago, but I had a client and his brothers were giving him all kinds of wrong advice. They were always in his ear and he was younger. They were the two older brothers. They thought they knew everything. And I didn't check them in the way that I should have. And I look back on that and it was a learning experience for me. And I said, I will never be too scared to say what that player needs to hear. I'm not going to worry about getting fired. I'm going to say exactly what I think. I'm going to give him my best advice. That's what he's paying me for. And I'm not going to worry about whether or not he doesn't want to hear it. So, it's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but, you develop a relationship, you develop a rhythm with each player. Every player is different. You've got to get to know them. You've got to get to know their family influencers. But at the end of the day, you've got to be able to speak to them in a way that's for their best interest at heart. And so you set those standards and it's a process and you get there, but, you've got to be truthful with them and you've got to set the standard.
So I have to add that, whether it's a player or a coach that I've represented, my promise to them is that I'm going to help educate you on some things that you may not already know about and the things that you're going to encounter the more money that you make. I mean, there's certain price ranges that you may get in, salary ranges that introduce different kinds of issues, more money, more problems. You get to a certain tax bracket, there's some things you need to know about that you may not have known about before when you're an assistant coach and you become a head coach or you become an AD or you become a team executive of some sort. There are all sorts of different levels of issues that are opportunities really, but somebody has to kind of help you find the expert in that category. So as a generalist, first of all, but also as a professor, I'm always getting calls from, whether they be former students of mine who are now executives at teams in the league office or players that I have or players that have retired. They know they can call me to say, hey, I'm thinking about buying an expensive watch. How do I know what's a good watch that's not just a ripoff, that's going to maybe appreciate in value? I said, now, you know what? I'm not going to give you that advice, but I can certainly tell you how we can get to that advice. Or I'm thinking about buying some real estate. I'm thinking about investing in real estate. I think I want to be like Junior Bridgman and own franchises. How about that? Which one should I buy? Well, I'm not going to answer that question, but they could know that I will find the information that will help you make a decision. So that's been always my promise, is that whoever I'm working with, I'm going to help you understand how to make an informed decision, because I'm going to educate you about your options. And then you're going to make your own decision, but you're going to make one with your eyes wide open.
And that's a critical piece. A lot of agents don't view it that way, right? A lot of agents want to keep the client in the dark and say, like, I've got all the information, like, let me kind of tell you what to do and let me direct you, as opposed to educating the client the way that Mason's talking about. I mean, it's a big difference in terms of how certain people represent their clients.
Yeah, and that really goes, I think, this term servant leader gets bantered about, but I really think the agent relationship, it truly is that. Yes, I work for you, my client, but you're 21 years old, I'm
Right.
50, and there's some things that I know just from life experience. And Jim, back to your point on the relationship, have you seen that change with the age of your clients? I know I've really struggled with having young players who didn't want to answer the phone. And I'm like, dude, when I call, you better believe it's something important about your future, okay? I need you to pick up the phone.
I think it's a generational thing. So yeah, we definitely struggle with, like, I've got a son who's 22 years old and a daughter who's 19. So I kind of get it from that perspective. Like, it's generational. But it's funny, like, when I first got into this business, I've been doing it, I guess, 24 years now. it was more like at the beginning, I was kind of like the big brother, right? And I would interact with the players in a certain way. Now I'm the same age, if not older, older than the parents. And so it's like a different relationship, not
It's
only
funny
with the
how that happens.
it's just kind of a weird transition, but I think it gives you more more authority, more credibility, like more, you obviously have more experience, so you can speak to them about all the things and kind of give stories given like the representation that you've had with other clients. And so it kind of gives you a little bit more gravitas in terms of talking to them. But yeah, like generationally, it's like you gotta, you know, kind of figure out how to communicate with them on their terms.
That's much like coaching. Trust me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And gentlemen, being in a business that is so competitive, how have you all been mentored and take time to mentor others?
Well, you know, for me, it's a natural progression of being an adjunct professor. So I teach Wharton undergrad sports law, and I've got 85 students in my class. So, you know, they all want letters of recommendation. They want to have office hours. They want to learn career advice and counseling. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, this is a different kind of job. It's not just that 3-hour lecture. It's a whole lot of other stuff that's involved, right? And then I also teach on the law school level at Howard Law School, and I usually have about 35 students. And they want jobs and internships, and they want advice on how to interview and that sort of thing. And I put that in my lectures basically. And then in the summer, I do a summer program for high school kids at Georgetown. We usually have a week-long course, and we have 150 high school kids from all over the world that come in. And I'm always cracking up when you get kids from different countries that are 14, 15 years old, they're smoking cigarettes and stuff. Excuse me, can I get a cigarette break? I'm like, what? You're like 15, shut up. What are you talking about? Well, back home, I get to do that. I'm like, okay, well, guess what? You're not gonna do that on Georgetown campus, you know, but it is an interesting thing, passing this message on and enlightening people at age 15 and at 25 in law school about our industry and the options that they may have available to them, from being team owners to general managers to scouts to corporate executives on the sponsorship side, being a marketing person, PR person, you know, so I bring in speakers and the whole bit. So it naturally becomes a function for me to be not just a professor during the lecture time, but to be a mentor. And I did that because Richard Lapchick kind of recruited me to do this in the early 2000s. I was out running around all over the world. He was like, I was living in Orlando at the time, and he said, I want you to come in and speak to our students at the MBA program at the DeVos Sports Management Program. And I said, I'll come for, you know, one talk. And he was like, no, I got to have you every week, you know. And I'm like, but I'm traveling all over the place. I don't know how I'm going to work that out, you know. But I did, and I was so glad. It was such a give and take, you know. I was able to get energy from these students, and they stayed in touch, and it became a network, you know, and it continued. And then I moved back to DC. I started doing it at Howard. And then I was playing golf one day in the summer, and somebody invited me to teach at Wharton. So then that happened. So, you know, it just kept evolving. But I get so much energy from giving back, and people that want to hear these stories and hear best practices about, you know, how do you handle some of these issues that players and coaches are going to deal with. You know, do you have a prenuptial agreement? How do you introduce that to your fiance? You know, how do you do that exactly without getting smacked, you know? You say, Mason says, I'm supposed to have a prenup. Oh, thank you. Put that on me, right? You know, so, but there's some things that are going to happen in the progression of a professional anything, right? That you're going to need some advice, because owners have advice. Why don't you have an advice? Right. You know, so I think mentoring is a word for it, but I think you can also sponsor too, right? So if you're mentoring folks, you're giving advice, but then am I putting my name on the line? If I'm writing letters of recommendation, if I'm calling people at teams and league offices and saying, hey, this student is special. Now I'm sponsoring the person to get them in, you know, and I've sponsored people like that are now who are in positions of decision-making power in both the teams and league side, union side, sponsor side. So, you know, corporate sponsors, I mean. So it takes different levels of engagement, from just saying, I think, you know, you could be doing this because of your skill set, but also let me make a phone call and give your resume to someone so they can pull it from the pile. Then we're much more engaged at that point. So it becomes a whole different sort of level of energy, frankly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I would add to that is I was really fortunate to have a great mentor at the start of my career in sports. So like I said, Lon Babby hired me. He and I just kind of hit it off on a personal level, and I had, the skill set and the resume that he was looking for to help grow his practice. And so it was great because I started with, representing Grant Hill and Tim Duncan with him, and, being introduced to every general manager and every assistant GM. And so I was able to develop those relationships based on having a great mentor at the beginning. So truly thankful for him. I've tried to pay it forward in terms of, the people that we hire at Tandem, and before that at Williams and Connolly. And so doing the same thing for them that Lon did for me. But really beyond that, like the thing that I remember is I remember being in college and trying to set up an internship and sending out letters. Back then we didn't have email and all that stuff. So sending out letters to all these people I'd read about in newspapers and magazines, and trying to like create an internship with companies that I admired and people that I admired. And I'd say like 98% of the people didn't get back to me or got back to me with a form
I
letter.
did. You said that to Petrie Stockton. I did get back to you.
You're right. And a lot of times people wouldn't get back to you. And I remember, being a young man, being pissed off about it and saying, if I ever get to a position where young people want to hear from me or get advice from me or whatever, I'm going to make myself available. Now, as an older guy, it's like, it can really be very time consuming to answer all those calls and respond to all those emails, but I do it. And I'm very proud of that because, I don't want to lose sight of how I felt when I was looking for help and guidance as well. So, I try to answer every call, every email, respond, try to give good advice and good guidance. I don't have a job for everybody, but I at least try to point them in the right direction and give them good advice going forward. And I think that's really important. But I think, having mentors and having guidance, like that is such a critical part of someone's career and development. So, I think it's really important to find the right mentor, and I think it's important to serve as one.
If I can augment that a little bit to say, you say find the right mentor. If you read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, it talks about the Mastermind Alliance. And so there's a committee of mentors that you want to engage, right? Because then you have this power of more than one that are bringing different energy, different expertise to the table for your benefit. And they want to see you succeed, So I've got my Mastermind Alliance for teaching in the academic world. I have my Mastermind Alliance for the representation business and consulting. Then I have my Mastermind Alliance for, basically the agent business, because that was Bill Strickland for sure. That was different people that helped me understand what was going on. That was basically even team executives that were quietly on my Mastermind Alliance because they engaged me. They wanted to see me succeed. And sometimes they kept me from looking stupid when I'm thinking I'm going to go and demand a certain amount of money from somebody. And I bounced it off one of my Mastermind Alliance executives. He's like, "Are you crazy? I wouldn't pay that fool anything like that." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm glad you said that. Because they didn't have a dog in that fight, but they didn't want me looking stupid either, and go and put such a price tag on somebody, nobody will touch it, So sometimes that saves you from some major embarrassment.
And the other thing I'll add to that is like the mentor-mentee relationship in many ways has to be organic and has to happen. Like a lot of times you can't just go to somebody and say, "Will you mentor me?" or "Will you be my mentor?" Like they'll give you, they'll give you guidance and whatnot, but the true mentors are the ones that you develop a very natural relationship with, and it goes from there.
Well, Coach Sutton, on that note, turn it back over to you.
Oh, absolutely. Great job, Odell. And now we're going to open it up for questions. And our first question comes from the West Coast, Dario.
Hey, Coach, how you guys? Thanks for having me on. I'm Coach Dario Frias, assistant coach over at Cal State San Marcos women's basketball NCAA Division II school out here in San Diego, California. This is great. This is great stuff. My question for you is, you guys have been in this business and, being successful. And what I'm intrigued more about is how have you guys been able to sustain success in your field over time?
Well, since I'm father time, I'll start. I'm not really, but it feels like that 31 years. I would say for me, and it could work differently for different people, but I believe continuously educating myself on what's going on in the industry, first of all, instead of believing that I know it all now, right? You constantly got to keep reading. You got to stay on. Now, being a teacher or being an adjunct professor every week, I'm in front of people trying to find something that I don't know. They're trying to stump me all the time. So that might be a little, I'm learning stuff and reading stuff to keep from being, targeted in class. But I think also, for sure, remaining flexible with technology and being able to maintain communication skills, right? Because we were communicating differently in '89 than we are now. And every 3 or 4 years, there was a different way of communicating, whether it was the two-way pager, whether it was the Nextel, SkyTel, whatever. Then it became the Nextel phones, walkie-talkie phones. Then it became, I had clients calling me saying, man, I need you to have that cellular phone. I remember when the car phones first came out, people wanted you to have that. They didn't want you to have the mobile phone. And I had a client call me who was like a bench warmer. And he was like, I need my agent to have like a cell phone, man. I need you to be reachable and accessible. I'm like, what emergency are you having? You don't even get into the game. Like, what is you're not making that much money? Like, what's your emergency? He's like, I just need my agent to be up to date, man. So, but those kind of people push me to stay up on all the different technology so that we can communicate the way that they want to communicate. And that's a must. I mean, you can't force a client to go and open up mail or something, and if they don't do that. Now I'm learning with esports players, email is so old. They're like, you email me, you got to stream with me, man. You got to go on this other sort of platform and catch me in my stream flow. I'm like, okay, this is crazy. I can't text you, I can't email you. There's a whole different level of communication going on now. So I am constantly trying to maintain my ability to communicate.
What I would say is just kind of a consistency of performance in terms of how I do my job. I think the agent business is very hard, and there are very few agents that have stood the test of time and had consistently, successful practices. And so, I think you can't get too high. Like when you have highs and you sign a great player, like you can't kind of rest on your laurels and think you've made it. And you can't get too low if somebody like fires you without reason, because it happens. There's always somebody out there trying to steal your guy, and like they might catch him at a time where he's susceptible and wants to hear what they have to say. So like, you just got to be, believe in who you are, believe in the services you provide, be very consistent with it, have integrity and ethics so that people know that they can rely on your word and in their dealings with you. And then I think that will drive long-term success.
I think to add to that is that what you're saying, part of what you're saying is that making sure people who engage you get value from you, so I think that value is what they come back for, right. And I always I'm pushing to make sure you're better off than you were when you first called me for something, or when you first engaged me for something. I want to make sure that I have moved the needle for you, and so people will come back when they feel like they were better off later, after calling. It might be just information. It might be some guidance. It might be shine a light on an issue. It may help them think through the options, but I think the value proposition has not, people say it differently now, but I think that's still important. People got to feel like they're better off after they finish talking to you.
Mm-hmm. And Jim, I can't agree with you more about not being too high or too low. My first client was the 14th pick in the NBA draft, and I thought it was going to always be like that. Boy, you all, that business, it ate me up real fast,
But you got to feel that, though. You got the jubilation of that 14th pick, man. Hey, that's sweet.
Yeah, but you can't be too high or too low. Yep. Yeah.
Again, just like in coaching. Next question, Mike Lopez.
Gentlemen, thank you for being on. My name is Mike Lopez. I host a creative coaching podcast. I'm also an athletic director and a head coach at a high school here in San Antonio, Texas. My question for y'all is kind of based around emotional intelligence. How important is that in your space, and also the mental health of the agent through time? Because it seems that there's so many different variables involved, to have emotional intelligence with your clients, and then of course maintaining a healthy mental health for yourself. How do y'all deal with that in your space?
Yep.
I think it goes back to not getting too high and too low. I think you've got to succeed in this industry, you've just got to be somewhat even keeled. You've got to be able to weather the storm. You've got to.
Jim has mastered that. I've never seen him curse anybody out.
No, I have. I just save it for when it's really when it's necessary. But yeah, you've got to stay even keel. Like, I'll go back to when I first started as an associate in a law firm. And I got there, and it's like, you know, I just always took control of my schedule. There are associates that would go there and just get burned out and eaten up by partners that were like demanding of their time, like all night, you know, every weekend, and they didn't know how to say no. And I think you've got to be able to say no. You've got to be able to set your boundaries. You've got to be able to you know, make your family the priority. Like I'll never forget, like there when my kids were little, you know, Halloween was really important to us. And I had a boss that you know, didn't want me to leave early for Halloween or something. And I was like, you know, I'm not, you know, we're doing that. That's important to my family. And so I think you've just got to stay grounded, and you've got to stay true to who you are, and just set the boundaries as to what, you know, what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. Again, this business is like, you know, pretty all consuming, and it's 24/7, but you still, you know, the clients that we have at least respect that, you know, that we have families, and that, you know, we have other priorities in addition to working hard for them. As far as like their emotional intelligence, again, like, you know, for us, it's really about trying to be very selective on the front end and working with the right players and the right families that get it, that are going to listen. And then to the extent that they have deficiencies there, like working with them, getting them with professionals, and just making sure that we, you know, service the entire client, whatever they need.
Well, that sounds fantastic when you have the option to pick the right families, right? When I first started, I took anybody that would hire me. And I had a potpourri of nutcases. There's no doubt about it, right? I mean, they were calling me middle of the night, cursing me out, having fights with their girlfriends, with, you know, all sorts of paid friends. I was like, look, you know what? You guys gonna have to do a better lifestyle, because you're dragging me down, you know? And so like Jim said, eventually I was able to be more selective after I got some experience. But in the beginning of the agent business, you know, unless you're working at Williams and Connolly, you know, my partner used to call me Walmart. Bill Strickland used to call me Walmart. He was like, you'll take any damn body who can make a team. And I was like, yep, if you can pay me a fee, I'm going to take it. And it was men and women I had. And so, but that's the way initially I was able to get traction and get experience. And then I realized, man, some of the stress I'm feeling is it's the selection of client, you know, and I'm not really, I had to start speaking up to them and asking them to call me at certain hours, or, you know, speak to me a certain way. And I'm not going to have just anything that you give me and say, you know, any behavior that you have, I'm not going to just keep getting you out of trouble. You know, I had to really tighten my perspective of what my role was going to be and what I was going to be able to, I guess, accept in my space, you know. And once I took control of that, and once I had some experience and I had leverage really, and was making enough money to say, okay, no to a client who can jump over the backboard. I mean, if you can jump over the backboard, I'll represent you. I mean, you know, you might be a crazy person, but I'll help you get some advice and some counseling, but I'm going to take you on, you know, keep jumping over the backboard. You know, we both gonna make some money on this, you know. But I think eventually though, as you get more mature and seasoned in this business, you have to be more selective, as he said, because otherwise it will chew you up. It will burn you out. There's so many different personalities out here, and there's so many families that, you know, that have a multitude of personalities and issues that they're dealing with. And it can really pull you down unless you can decide on what part of the day you're going to work, be a little more organized. You're going to play, you know, some kind of sport or release the tension. You know, golf became my sport after basketball was eventually, until I was 35. And everybody I knew that was 35 was popping their Achilles tendons. And I was like, okay, that's enough basketball for me. I'm going to start playing golf. Well, if you really get into golf, it can definitely consume you so that you can get, you know, your mind off of some of these other things, you know. So you got to have some balance, you know. And like Jim said, going out to Halloween or whatever, you know, my daughter started playing volleyball in high school, and getting back in town, coming off the road to go and shift gears and balance the life out will certainly help you. I think if you start to, you know, balance your life and not look at it has to be the next deal, the next recruit all the time. You've got to balance. Otherwise you won't last. I mean, you just won't be able to have the sustainability that you want to have over 30 or 40 years.
I know for me, I had to really control the time too, the calendar too. I had to set that from 5 to 7 or 7:30 in the evenings, I'm not going to answer calls. If you're working on a deal or something, that's totally different. But I've got to spend time with my family. Yeah, I had a young child as well. When I started the business, my wife was working and commuting from DC to Reston and back. Who those of us in the DMV, we know what that's like. You know, and I really had to set those boundaries from a time standpoint.
Next question, Kenneth.
Hi, Mr. Ashe. I just graduated from Conn College, so it's great to see another NESCAC person.
Oh, okay. Hamilton.
Yeah, you guys kicked our butts my 4 years there. So, but then again, so did every other team. Anyways, but yeah, this goes for both of you. I think both of you have had like a lot of experience, and not just in representation, but in law in general. So I just want to know like how those perspectives how those experience shaped your perspective today, and how valuable that perspective is in what you do.
The perspective of being a lawyer, you saying?
Yeah, or just general, like whether it's life perspective or from like your different opportunities throughout the sports world, the legal world, how that's kind of helped in your job and what you're doing now.
Well, I could tell you, for me, there was a time when all of my energy and my focus and my self-value was on getting a draft pick. There was a good 15, 20 years of that. And then I said, you know what? I have more skills than just that, and my friends would call you, family would call you. I didn't see you in the green room this year at the draft. What's up, man? You falling off. I'm like, slow down, dog. Slow down. All right. You know what I mean? These are your family and friends. I'm like, come on now. Are you going to value me based on whether you saw me at the draft? So it became a time where I wanted to, especially when I had to be home, when my daughter was starting to get into high school stuff and I was going to have to be off the road a little bit, I changed and started doing more law than I did the agent business, and I still stayed in the sports world, and I represented agents and I represented marketing deals, and I did entertainment concert deals and tours. I did other things using my law skills. So being a lawyer has helped me not rely on the stress of, you've got to have a first round pick every year. Otherwise you are worthless. You know what I mean? I had to get out of that frame of mind, because for a minute I was thinking, God knows the draft is almost here and I don't have somebody. Or if I have somebody, I got to hold on to him. Oh Lord, if he fires me before the draft, I'm worthless. Agents somehow fall in that, into that space. And and if you are multi-talented, if you know how to do more than one thing, letting that flourish and let it organically manifest itself, that's helped me keep my sanity, number one, and has helped me stay relevant in the business as I use other skills than just that. Now I'm back. I just got recertified in basketball 2 years ago, but for a minute I was working consulting with Morgan Stanley, not as a wealth manager, but as a labor and employment lawyer, helping them create a training program for their advisors on how to service owners and coaches and players and entertainers, and breaking down structures of deals. I had fun doing those things because I had that ability to do that, and still made decent money, so, being able to be well-rounded and using those skills keeps you from being, to me, myopic or being so tunnel vision. And then you get tired and bored and burn out, and you feel like you only can do one thing and you keep doing it just to make a living as opposed to having a passion about it. I have a passion about a lot of things. Monetizing talent. I've represented Madonna's trainer. I've represented, black figure skaters that you're like, what? Black people skate? When did that happen? Right? I have all kinds of different clients, right? So because I'm open to keep it fresh and flowing organically.
I think what I would say is, like I said, I started my career as a corporate attorney. So I was doing corporate finance and mergers and acquisitions for 4 years. I thought it was a great foundation. You're working on multi-billion-dollar deals. And so you're learning how to do very complicated transactions, how to pay for those transactions. The thing that I realized, though, is that as an attorney, I was servicing the business guys. And I didn't like that. Like, I remember like one of my early deals, like the attorneys were there with the investment bankers and the counsel for the company, and we were counsel for the investment bankers. And so it was like 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. And the investment bankers and the company guys were saying, all right, this is how we want the documents to be turned overnight. And when we come back in the morning, we expect to have these documents done. And they all went out for a steak dinner and left all the attorneys there to draft all these documents overnight. And I said, I don't like this the deal at all. Like, I want to be on the business side. And so I think, if it weren't for transitioning into sports and being an agent, I don't think I'd be a practicing attorney at this point, because I kind of like the art of the deal. I like negotiating. I like doing deals much more than I like being an attorney and kind of the papering of the deal and looking for all the issues that potentially could go wrong. So I like this practice because it's kind of a hybrid of both. And so I get to use that legal experience and background, but it's not all that I do. It's more like I consider myself more of a negotiator at this point, more a marketer at this point, obviously an agent as compared to being a lawyer.
Thank you very much.
Next question, Caitlin Benedict.
Hey, my name is Caitlin Benedict, coach basketball at Holy Innocents here in Atlanta. My question is for both of you guys, and it's how have you been able to use your platform for a cause greater than yourself?
So my platform. So I have used, I guess, my network to benefit different organizations. You know, I played guitar when I was in college. And so, you know, I knew that playing guitar, I know that playing guitar kept me out of a lot of trouble when I was in high school and in college, and helped put some money in my pocket because I played professionally. So I have done everything I can to help students that are disenfranchised or students that are gifted in the DC area get free music lessons, you know, and I've been doing that for 20 years with the Washington Jazz Arts Institute. So I've been chairman of that organization. It's it's a tax exempt organization. I use my network of corporate relationships to help supply, you know, funds to generate that. And that program has fed artists into and musicians into the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and then from there into conservatories. So I feel like, you know, I'm using the people that I'm utilizing and leveraging the people that I meet in the sports world, entertainment world, to give back to the community and to the grassroots, because I know having the ability to study music and to play a musical instrument, if you have that sort of interest, can certainly teach you a lot of life skills. And I've done, you know, what I can for sure to give back through the music world in that respect.
Yeah. So what I've done is, like, you know, we've made a priority at Tandem that any client that we work with, we really try to encourage them to do things in the community and to have a charitable component to their efforts. You know, a lot of times guys come into the league and they don't really know what they want to do in the community. Like, they'll come in and they'll say, okay, I want a signature shoe. You know, I want a foundation, you know, certain things that they've seen and they expect to have as professional athletes. And so part of it is kind of directing them in the right way with respect to their philanthropy. You know, the first thing is like discouraging them from starting a foundation and saying, like, you know, there's so many other charities that are existing out there that could use both your money and your influence and your impact. So let's find one that really appeals to some of the things that you care about, and helping them figure out what it is and, you know, how they want to make an impact, and then participating with them in terms of maximizing that. So it's like, you know, we've got countless examples of things that the guys have done over the years, like Ray Allen with his computer labs, or Jared Allen with his STEM stuff, and, you know, just making sure that we help them come up with their ideas and really help them execute those ideas.
Thank you.
Next question, Trey Brumell.
Thanks, Coach. Jim, you talked a lot about maintaining your integrity throughout the business. I'm sure there's 100 agents for every one player, right, that's in the NBA. How do you go about maintaining your integrity and competitiveness at the same time?
It's tough. I mean, I think I take myself out of a lot of conversations just because, you know, I'm not willing to pay. And I think, you know, I would say like 90+% of agent decisions are made based on somebody getting paid, whether it's an AAU coach, a friend, a family member. Like oftentimes it's family members at this point. And so from the beginning, I've always said that, you know, I'm not doing it that way. Like that doesn't jive with who I am as a person and how I want to do business. And so, you know, it's tough because, again, like, you're not in every conversation. You know, it makes it more important that when you do get in the room with like a Ja Morant and his family, or a Grant Hill and his family, or, you know, Justin Jackson and his family, it makes it, you know, a very important meeting, because those families are fewer and further between. So you want to make sure that when you get the opportunity, you're able to capitalize and close on it. But I think, like, you know, I think everybody in every industry, like, there's going to be corruption. There's going to be people that have a lack of ethics. And I think that, you know, at the outset, you got to make a decision, you know, am I going to do things that way or this way? And if you decide that you're going to do it this way, then you've got to be prepared to, you know, you're not going to be able to play, you know, to swim in every pool, but, you know, I think the way I look at it, at the end of the day, I end up with the people that I want to be associated with anyway. And so it works for me. You know, I don't know that it works for everybody, but it certainly works for me.
As far as I'm concerned, when I meet prospective clients, what I try to do is focus on what I can do for you, but I don't bash other agents. You know, some agents get into this whole negative recruiting, you know, and I don't participate in that sort of thing. So most agents who know that, in fact, I've even called agents and said, hey, you know, I was out with a client and your client wanted to go to dinner with us. And so he did, you know, and he was unhappy about some things. I'll call the agent if I know the agent and say, hey, you know, I think you got to tighten up your relationship because this guy was talking crazy. And I hate when a player starts talking bad about an agent that's working for him. I'm like, listen, you know, I tell my clients, if you don't want me to work for you, tell me that. Don't go and put all this negative out there that I'm not doing this or you're not happy or whatever. Let me know that, right? So I try to let other agents know if I'm with if their client happens to be with my client or something like that. So over the years, I've tried to at least have a respectful relationship with other agents, you know, unless that agent is a snake, you know, then that's a different story. But I think generally speaking, for those that are reputable and respectful agents, you know, I don't target other people's clients, number one, and number two, I try to be communicative with the agent, you know, especially if there's going to be an issue. You know, you can't hold on to every client. I mean, and if I'm recruiting a client, they're going to make a decision. And if they make a decision, it's not me. I don't bash the agent. I don't bash the client because sometimes they'll come back to you anyway, you know? So I just try to just be straight up with people and stay positive rather than go the negative route. And it ultimately, if it's going to be my client down the road, they'll be back, you know? So I don't really have to bash anybody.
Right.
Next question, Jay Wick.
What's going on, guys? Appreciate both of you coming on. Working in the sports industry, what's your definition of a leader? And what are some examples of good leaders you've seen, whether that's a sports administrator, a coach, or a player?
You know, I think a leader is someone that is not afraid to stand for a principle, stand for a movement or a cause, and will speak up to bring attention to that, as well as resources to something that's worthy, you know, whatever that is. Some people don't stand for anything, you know, so I wouldn't call them a leader, but somebody that will stand up for a cause, will speak up. They don't have to be the leader of the free world, but they can certainly be, you know, the leader of decency, you know. And so that's how I see a leader, as somebody that speaks up and will champion a cause.
Yeah, I look at leaders as the ones that are able to bring out the best in other people. You know, like we were talking about mentorship and things like that. You know, I think bringing out the best, teaching people, guiding them, you know, really maximizing their opportunity. That's the way I look at every employee at Tandem, and trying to make sure that I'm positioning them for success. And I think, you know, someone that values teamwork. You know, it's like the leaders for me are the ones that don't have the big ego. I mean, there's a lot of big egos in this industry, and that's not what I consider to be a leader. What I consider to be a leader is somebody who kind of puts others ahead of himself and is trying to, you know, kind of the servant leader thing that we were talking about, servicing others, whether it be your employees or your clients or, you know, just other people generally. I think those are the people that I tend to, you know, admire.
Next question, Tyson Wheeler, 712.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys coming on.
You stuck with that number.
Killing me. This is for both of you guys. Do you guys represent college coaches, assistant coaches? And if you do, or if you don't, do you recommend a college assistant coach to get a agent and to help him, obviously, to get another assistant job, guide him in the right direction to try to become a head coach? Or even if an assistant coach wants to be a coach in the NBA or some part of the NBA, so moving from college to the NBA.
I have always represented coaches in some way, shape, or another. Whether or not I advertise that I do has been a separate story, because some coaches don't want that to be known, and some universities don't want to deal with the agent directly. So you end up advising a coach on what to say, what to do. You're in their ear and they call you and tell you what's going on because the AD doesn't want to meet with you. You know,
Right.
I find that too often and it doesn't make any sense to me. But as far back as the 90s, we used to advise a bunch of coaches, and usually they would call and say, "This is my situation," help them think through their options, help them understand what to say, how to structure their deal. But their AD would not meet directly with a representative, whether it's a lawyer or an agent, and I still find that, unfortunately, in some schools. So you end up becoming an advisor to assistant coach. But certainly, yeah, I think it's never too soon for you to have a lawyer, a strategist, a tax consultant, a private banker, all those things. It's never too soon for those things if you're trying to plan for a career, a successful career. Those things can help you. So that's part of your mastermind alliance to me.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I agree with that. I don't have anything to add to that, that answer, to be honest with you. I mean, I've found the same thing. It's like, when I've done the assistant coaches, it's been a former client who's becoming an assistant coach somewhere. And it's absolutely the same thing. Like, they don't, if they don't have a lot of leverage, you're more advising them behind the scenes as opposed to being like the frontline negotiator for them.
And you're saying that is better for the assistant coach because ADs don't want to deal with them. So basically, you guys would advise your client.
It depends on the situation. I mean, that's all.
Yeah, the ADs won't deal with representation in some cases, and so that's really the only option, is to kind of give them guidance behind the scenes and have them negotiate on behalf of themselves.
You'll find in certain situations at certain universities, for some reason or another, as soon as you say to your AD, could you guys speak to my lawyer, they get tense. They're ready to fight. What?
Right.
If you say speak to my agent, oh, you're trying to run the price up, right? I mean, it's like these connotations that they got this knee-jerk reaction to you trying to be complicated, right? Why can't we just deal with this, you and me, And you're like, well,
right.
Because they don't want someone who does this for a living to ask them to explain where they got your valuation from. They don't want to explain that. And they don't want to hear what somebody else is making somewhere else that makes it look like their offer is,
low
too small.
Or something like that.
Because now they got to articulate and explain the rationale as to why they want to pay you a certain amount. They don't want to deal with that sometimes,
And do you think that's why most assistant coaches only get 1-year deals in college?
I'm not sure if that's why. But I mean, I just think ADs are running a business, and they're going to try to get your services as cheap as they can.
Right.
And then if your value goes up, we got a problem.
Right. All right. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it.
Next question, Rob O'Driscoll.
Yeah, guys, Rob O'Driscoll from Drexel. Thanks to both you guys for coming out here. Mason,
hope you're not an AD, because I'm sorry if you are.
I'm not. Mason and Jim and even Odell, you guys have all remarked about over the last 20, 25 years how the landscape has changed. And one thing that's definitely changed in college and the hiring process, probably the last 10 or 15 years, is the search firm. I want to get your guys' opinion on the power or maybe the influence that search firms have, and what your thoughts are on how powerful they are in the search process.
So your question of how powerful they are, or should you work, or should you deal with them?
Just what your thoughts on search firms are in the college hiring process.
Yeah, I think they've become powerful for sure, because they have created divisions at the big firms because they realize there's some, money to be made. But I think the search firms in the college coaching business, just like it is in the lawyer business, it's a case-by-case analysis, a case-by-case basis. There's always a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of intangible influences involved, so you can't just say, Korn Ferry is a great firm for everybody. I mean, not necessarily, it depends. I mean, it depends on who is the person there and what's going on with the agenda. So they are a reputable firm, but I don't know, you got to be careful when you're talking to them. You got to be careful when you talk to anyone. It's an interesting trick bag, when you get a call from them, or if you're trying to promote yourself to them to get in the mix so that they have you on their radar, as opposed to them calling you and saying one of their clients is interested in you. You know, in either one of those respects, it's a very nuanced and fragile engagement that you have with them, because they're not really on your side in any of those respects.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They have a client that's paying them, right? You know, and so you just have to you have to understand, no matter how nice that person may sound or treat you, they are not your agent. You know, they're not your advocate, really. You know, they're trying to fill a position on budget, you know, with somebody that can help them get a commission out of it. I mean, that's what they're doing, right? So I just, you know, I don't know. I've had a lot of different of these headhunters, if you will, or placement firms deal with students of mine, as well as even, you know, lawyers, friends, and myself. You know, I think there's a science to how you deal with them, but you can't avoid them because they are being hired to go fill positions. You can't not return the call. I mean, because otherwise you won't get considered, you know.
So I've had less experience with search firms. You know, my general impression is that they have tremendous power. And I think, you know, people in hiring capacities rely on the search firms for guidance. But my impression is that, and I think it's very political, as Mason said, number one. And number two is, my impression is that they really don't have a handle on the market or people. I mean, I just feel like they're just doing research like anyone else and just trying to identify candidates. And so I think they do have a lot of power. I just don't see that they are as good as they profess to be.
You know, I see why the need for ADs to use a search firm for background checks, do some of that pre-vetting. It also provides cover, obviously, if they have a sitting head coach who they know they are not going to retain, they can start those kind of third-party conversations. But I've seen the talent pool and candidate pool really shrink because of agendas of certain search firms. Whereas in the past, athletic directors really saw it as part of their job to know who the up and coming coaches were. You know, taking a look at when a visiting team comes to your gym, looking at how that coach or how that assistant coach conducts themselves and how their team is prepared. And a lot of that's missing from the hiring process in the talent pool right today.
Thanks, Scott.
Next question, Jerry McFarland.
Guys, I definitely thank you all for sharing your time and your knowledge and everything with us. Jerry McFarland, assistant coach at Washington Adventist University in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Just a question for Jim. Jim, being, you know, from Washington Adventist, we're an NAIA school, small NAIA school. From an NAIA and Division I, low Division I, Division IIs and Division IIIs, a lot of guys think that they can just go play overseas. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how hard or easy it is, and just a little bit also about the overall lifestyle you can make by playing overseas?
Yeah, so it's not as easy as people think, to be honest with you. I mean, I think you've got to have the right agent for the right market for your skill level. And so, you know, I will say that there's opportunity to play basketball everywhere. And, you know, so it's depending on the skill level, you have to be in the right market. So, you know, like some of those schools that you were mentioning, like they may not be able to play like EuroLeague, obviously, but they can make a living in smaller markets and have a great career. The one thing that I would encourage guys is I think that, you know, a lot of American players look at playing overseas as you know, something that's not good or beneath them. And we always try to encourage our guys to go overseas. Like, you can have a very great career over there. You can earn a lot of money, but, you know, most importantly, you can experience another culture. You can learn, you can expose yourself to something that you wouldn't otherwise see. And you'd be surprised how many Americans go over there and they just stay in they'll go play a game and they'll stay in their room. They go to practice and stay in their room and play video games or watch TV or movies. And they don't experience the culture. They don't go out and experience the food or try to learn the language or meet people or join a church or whatever it may be. And that's a real mistake. And it's like, so when you encourage these guys to find the right representation, number one, that fits their skill level and the markets, but also encourage them to really, experience another culture and experience like the joy of kind of being over there and learning something beyond what they already are used to.
I've experienced a little bit of a difference. Sometimes players go and engage too much. I sent a guy to Amsterdam. Of course, he was very happy all the time, and I was like, "Why are you so happy when I call you, man?" And you forgot to go to practice, by the way. Oh shoot, that's right. So they take too much of the culture sometimes in certain places. I didn't break any laws, though. I said, I didn't say you broke a law, but you got to go to practice. So, but no, I think that the overseas business has grown so much. There's always somewhere to play. But the top teams are very big snobs. They all want Michael Jordan for $10,000 a month, and I'm like, okay, Michael Jordan, you're not going to get for $10,000 a month. The stats that they're looking for, the top Division I program that they're looking for is frustrating. If you look at Portsmouth Invitational, they have very few Division II players playing year before last. They didn't have it last year. And I had the Division II Player of the Year, Haywood Highsmith from Wheeling Jesuit. He didn't even get invited to Portsmouth, didn't get invited to any NBA Summer League teams, but he still got a two-way contract through, the 76ers and the Delaware Bluecoats. So, that was a difficult thing to do, but fortunately Elton Brand fell in love with him. He liked this, he was the prototypical player, but he was not selected by any of those things. So it's difficult. Now he's playing in Germany. He played 2 years in the G League, and now he's in Germany for the very reason that Jim said. I told him, it'd be nice to not to just play a third year of the G League. Why don't you get some experience and experience another culture, increase your market value so that you can always go back there if you want to. You can play in the NBA for a few years and then you come back if you want to. At least you have an ability to have a different market. So I think guys don't maybe see the benefit that they could of that, but also they're, the hiring process is very elitist and it's tough. It's tough. If you play in certain countries, you get 25 points a game in Mexico, the European teams won't touch you. I'm like, what's going on with that? So there's certain markets, if you're trying to have a trajectory of career, you got to play this market like a chess game. You got to build on your career so that you can get to the EuroLeague teams or the Euro Cup teams. But there's somewhere to play everywhere. But whether or not you're trying to increase your money every year, throughout is going to be a strategy. You got to play like a chess game.
Before we go on to the next question, Tyson Wheeler, who played overseas, like to share a comment here.
Yeah, just quickly for the guys that are not draft picks, second-round draft picks, and they had a pretty good career. What can the guy, but they want to go play overseas? Where can they go to get the exposure? Because I get guys all the time that had pretty good college careers, maybe low D1, D2. Is there anything in America now? I know back when I was playing, they had some type of events in Las Vegas, and I think they had something in Canada. But I was fortunate because I got drafted to be able to go overseas, so I had some type of validity that I could play at a higher level. But for the guys that don't have that, what can they do to get over there? Is there anything?
There used to be those camps like the Richard Kaner camps and those kind of things where you had those European League exposure camps in Chicago and New Jersey and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I don't know if they're going on. I don't see them. I think that's a void. That's a market void right now to be able to expose players to the international markets. Because if a player doesn't go to Portsmouth, where all of those, or the Summer League at Vegas, where all those scouts are, right? All the international scouts are there, but I don't know that they're congregating anywhere else. Jim, I'm not aware of any other places.
Yeah, I think Summer League is really the best opportunity to showcase yourself. Beyond that, I mean, I've seen stuff like these paid things like.
Oh yeah. The Vegas thing you're talking about, right? That's total waste of time, man.
Yeah. Right, that's what I thought. I figured that. Yeah. The moneymaker.
Yeah, I mean, you got guys that hadn't played in 5 years out there, look like me trying to, I was like,
trying
come
to tear
on, man.
Achilles or something.
Yeah, I'm like, come on, man, your Achilles about to pop. I hear it, I'm like, come on. Yeah, that's unfortunate because I've wasted money the last couple of years trying to just test that out with a couple of people just to see, so I can get to see how they play so I can better sell them, and I've taken 5, 6 guys out there the last couple of years, and man, it was just no action whatsoever after all of that. 3-4 days of all this, shuttling back and forth to the hotel, to the games. And, I had like 4 or 5 guys, they had different game times. I'm running around. And this is not the UNLV. This is the summer, the Euro League summer stuff, and I'm like complete waste of time. Oh,
gotcha. Okay. So no dice for those guys.
Yeah, we have 3 more questions here. The next question is Darrell Robinson.
Hey, hello, how y'all doing, fellas? Darrell Robinson, head boys basketball coach, Danville High School in Danville, Illinois. I can speak a lot on that last question about the playing overseas from a small college, because I went to Union College in Kentucky at the time, but it's like 2001, and I went to a showcase called Legacy Sports down in Atlanta at Clayton State that helped land me a deal over in the BBL over in England.
What year was this?
2001,
Okay.
2002.
Yeah.
So it was like with Legacy Sports, and I went down there, played real well. So I played over in England and played over in Scotland. So that helped me a lot. Then also like the last, about 2016, 2017, I was part of, and there's room for this too. I was part of a minor league, the MPBA, Midwest Professional Basketball Association, where in the 2 seasons I was a head coach down there, I helped 18 players get deals overseas. Even one got on with the Bulls for a little bit. So it's room for, I would call it AA basketball, because the G League is like AAA in baseball. It's room for it, but you got to have some money behind it. You know how it goes.
You remember the USBL league, right?
Yeah, yeah. I almost played in USBL for Cliff Levingston was the head coach, I think, at the time.
That was one of the best AA. You talk about level players. You talking about Darryl Armstrong and them guys that Scott Armstrong came out of that from Fayetteville State. Back in the 90s, to me, that was the best league. I had guys coming out of there going to different places. And that is I think that spring league between April and June.
Yeah, the timing.
Is the perfect time to have a league, and they just don't have it. Not the ABA league, because they had too many teams and they were going out of business on the way to the road game.
And they still trying.
And they out of business. I'm like,
and they still trying.
I ain't messing with that. But I'm talking about that USBL, that 8 weeks. Was the perfect kind of league, man. I'm telling you. And then I in the CBA, well, now it's the G League.
Yeah.
I had a guy back in the late 90s, Fonzo Ford from Mississippi Valley State. He was the MVP. He was the Rookie of the Year, the CBA, and MVP. And then taking him to Spain and Greece and Italy. I mean, he ended up becoming the Euro League scoring champion, and they still call the scoring champion after the Alfonso Ford thing. And he's from Mississippi Valley State. So, I mean, it can happen.
Yeah.
But he got it through the CBA first, because he married his Mississippi Valley State stats with the CBA, and then that gave him credibility to go to the ACB in Spain.
Yeah.
So if you're coming out of a small school, you need that G League.
Yes.
You need something to marry with that stat that you have from a Division II or Division III, if that's the case, so that you can get that top league in your. It can happen, but you're going to have to marry something with that stat, I think.
Right. That's exactly it. So my question I want to get to you guys about, because I don't want to hold the time. How important is it for you guys relationships with not alone with just your players, but like with the GMs throughout the league and the front office people?
That's everything. Those
have y'all had any encounters to where I guess it wasn't as good? To where so yeah, I wonder, like, if you had anything of that nature.
I can say, like, I've only had one experience where I'll never trust this guy again.
One?
Yeah. You said I don't cuss people out. I cuss this one out.
Well, you a blessed man. You only had one person like that?
One that he just completely flat out lied to me. And we had a deal elsewhere that had a time frame on it. And this particular GM said, and the player wanted to play. So let me back up. So I had a deal with Team A, right? Mm-hmm. The player had played for Team B. The GM of Team B said, don't take that deal. Give me one more day. You give me the one more day, I can get you X amount, which was more than the other team. right? So we wait that extra day, and luckily I had a great relationship with the other team, but he essentially reneged on the deal that he had offered, and it could have cost us the other deal that I had to like resurrect from the other GM. So, you know, most of them are pretty honest, fair dealing. Some are more full of shit than others, but for the most part, they're pretty honest. This guy just flat out lied. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forgive him for it. I'll never trust anything he ever says to me again. You know, but, you know, having those relationships with GMs, that's the key. So you can have guys that are, you know, inexperienced and have clients, but if they don't have those relationships where the GMs know and can trust dealing with them and, you know, have a little bit of a history with them, then, you know, in my mind, they're not going to be as effective as somebody that has that kind of relationship.
Well, to me, part of the secret sauce in that relationship is that I believe that the deal we do has to be mutually beneficial. I learned that from Mark McCormick when I was at IMG. If your deal is not mutually beneficial, you're not going to be able to go back.
Right.
You can't just exploit somebody and choke them off and cut their throat and drain them and then, hey, I got that dude, right? Well, you'll never be able to go back there again, you know? And so I always know that it's going to be somewhat of a give and take, and we got to figure that out where we're both happy at the end. You know, I've had clients say, kill him, kill him, kill him. What are you talking about? I want to just abuse them. I'm like, dog, you know, I'm in this business long term, you know, and if you want to stay in this industry as well, you got to realize everything's not going to be 100% in your favor. We're going to have to give and take on something. You got to tell me what's most important to you, and I'll do my best to make those priorities a reality. But it's got to be a mutually beneficial deal for the relationship with you and the general manager or an owner to continue. I just believe that, you know, and so that's kind of one of my, I guess my mottos.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Next question, Lamont Franklin, University of Miami.
Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for being on. Lamont Franklin down here at the University of Miami. I actually had two questions for you. The first one, you've kind of touched on it quite a bit, so maybe if you can just maybe quickly just kind of cover off on that, and then I have a second one for you. The first question stems around, you know, you mentioned having connections, or if you have a client that comes to you and ask about investments or ask about marketing or different things. My question would be, when you initially go into a pitch or a meeting with a prospective client, do you bring to the table a team of individuals that you work with that can address those areas up front, and, you know, obviously gives you a little more credibility with the prospective client? And then my second question would be, as you look at building out your roster of clients and the people that you have, and you guys have talked about, as the longer you've been in this business, you've been able to be a little more selective in who you represent. So with that in mind, have you ever gotten yourself in a situation or been in a place where maybe you've had multiple clients that you represent, whether it be multiple players, multiple coaches, or executives, where there may be some form of a conflict of interest as it relates to advancing each individual's career or opportunity, where you've got to figure out, okay, I've got two guys that would be a good fit for this opportunity that's out there. How do you kind of prioritize that? Or do you try to get on the front end of that and really streamline who you represent to try to keep yourself out of those predicaments?
Is that the first or the second question?
That was the second question.
Oh, what was the first question?
The first question was just around, you know, you talked about how, you know, you've had clients that have come to you or people that have asked you, hey, you know, I want to look to get into investing, or I want to get into, you know, looking at some marketing deals and things of that nature. So my question was, do you have a team that's already built of individuals that when you go to meet with the prospective client, hey, this is my team of individuals. I've got an advisory board of 5 or 6 folks that I work with. So if you need this, this is who we go to. If you need that, this is who we go to.
You know, I mean, it has depended. Over my 30 years, I've done all of the above, and I prefer a smaller, lean, mean team myself at this point. and depends on what a player really wants. And then I customize the team of service providers based on the specific needs of a player, as opposed to saying this 8-person, this 8-headed monster is with me all the time, no matter what your needs are. I don't take that approach anymore. I've tried it. I think that's overkill. I don't know, Jim.
Yeah, so we have professionals in all those areas. So we have marketing professionals that we bring to the table when we have a meeting with a prospect. We have PR professionals. We have a social media manager. We have people that kind of focus on the concierge type services. So we try to be full service in that regard.
But that's in-house you're talking about.
That's in-house, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I thought he was saying bringing like eight-headed monsters from all these different companies.
No. These are all in-house.
Okay.
The one thing that we don't do is we don't do the financial stuff. So I think that's a complete conflict of interest when you have the agent and the agent is also representing or managing your money. I think that's a huge conflict of interest, and we don't do that. I think your second question was refresh my memory again.
Just your book of clients that you have, and whether you run into any situations where you may have multiple clients that may be in the same market.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the huge agencies like the CAAs and the Washingtons of the world, I don't know how they navigate those conflicts, because they've got conflicts every year. Like they'll represent multiple people in the draft that are the same position, the same area of the draft. I don't know how they go and talk to a GM and sell one guy versus the other when they're competing, directly with each other. I've been fortunate not to have those issues. We try to avoid conflicts on the front end. Sometimes you can't. Like in this free agency period, I've got multiple centers that we're working with. But, you start having conversations with GMs and they offer different things. And so one might be a better shooter, one might be a better rebounder. And so you're having the conversations, but you're selling the attributes of each player. And, fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't really had issues where there have been conflicts with the clients that we're selling at the same time, but we do try to avoid it.
That's the key. You just said it. You highlight the attributes of each individual client, and the team's got to go, and decide who they like the best for a certain situation. You're not really forcing the team to take one player or the other. You're highlighting the assets of each one.
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Next question, and the last question of the night goes to Joseph Kirkendall.
Hi, guys. Thanks for being on. I'm probably in the minority as a non-coach and on the administration side, so I won't hold your administration comments earlier against you. I'm just kidding. I
take it back.
I get where they come from. Totally get where they come from. Obviously, agents have a reputation that you kind of alluded to, whether it's a Hollywood reputation or justified. And so, justified or other, have you ever had a client challenge your character? And if so, how did you approach the situation and adjust accordingly or approach the discussion?
So usually if that has happened, and it's been very rare, it's usually somebody in his ear or her ear, and so typically if we get it out on the table, I always tell clients, you got any kind of beef, don't carry it around. It's a relationship. We're going to be together long term. You got to beef with me about anything. Let's put it on the table. Let's chop it up. And usually when we put it on the table, chop it up, we get to the root of it, which is usually some bull crap. Somebody said something to you about me, or there's something, they contradicted one of the advice I may have given them, or they may have said that I'm compromised because I know that general manager from back in the day or whatever. Usually once we get to the root of what is really the issue, then we can diffuse it, because it's usually rooted in something that's not reality, alternative facts or something like that, right? So, but I think if we can put it on the table and chop it up is how I deal with it. Like, you got a beef, just put it on the table. Let's talk about it, and if there's something I need to monitor or something I need to alter because you don't appreciate the way I approach something on your behalf, then we can make that adjustment. But usually is rooted in something that's irrational and untrue.
Yeah. I've never had anybody question my character. I think what I would say is dealing with coaches and college administrators, sometimes they can paint you with the same brush they paint everybody. Agents have a very bad rap. And in some cases it's earned and deserved. In many cases it's not. We're providing a service. We're trying to maximize the revenue that the player gets based on his talent. We're trying to look out and protect him and, really steer his career. And so we get a bad rap. And, I think it can be frustrating when you call a coach or you call a compliance officer or whatever, and they kind of give you the back of the hand and, don't treat you with the respect that you deserve. And so that's really where I've felt it, not necessarily directed to me as an individual, but directed to the profession.
So let me just give an example. I had a client who was going to be a free agent, and his current team wanted to keep him. And they said to him, you know, Mason's going to go out and shop you all around and get the biggest money, you know, biggest deal so he can make a bigger commission. And the player's like, so is that why you're doing this? You know, are you doing this for yourself? You want to make more money? I'm like, you want to play in a team that's going to take you to the championship, right? And you want more minutes. You said that yourself, you know, but the general manager was going, this particular general manager, like Jim was saying, who needed to be cursed out, was telling my client when I wasn't there, you know, Mason's just trying to make a bigger fee on you. That's why he's moving you to another team. That's why he's shopping you in free agency so he can make a better fee. And so the player's like listening to that and want to talk to me about this kind of, you know, unsettled feeling about why can't I just do an extension here? I said, you can, but it's going to be less money. It's up to you, you know, but this general manager's in my client's head saying my motivation is only for the fee. You know, and then I realized that the client really didn't like the sport. This was the craziest situation I've ever had. The client wanted me to get the most money I can without him having to play. He didn't really want to get in the first place. He didn't really like the game. I was like, how do I get a first round pick who doesn't really want to play? He just wants to make as much money as he can faking the funk. Man, I'm telling you, they didn't prepare for me that in law school, boy. I'm like, you don't want to play?
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for the transparency.
Well, this has been absolutely tremendous. Jim, I'm gonna start with you first, then I'll go to Mason. What would your call to action be for our Living Trophy Master Zoom class?
I think pay it forward, like what we were talking about before. It's like as you guys become, you know, successful and continue along your career paths, just continue to look back and to help the people that are behind you and educate them and mentor them and provide advice. I mean, I think that's really important. So that would be my call to action for everybody.
And well, thank you for that, Jim. And Mason, what is a mantra, quote, Bible passage that you try to live your life by?
Treat others like you would like them to treat you has always been my foundation, and people who know me know that's true in how I engage them. There's no question about that.
Well, I want to thank both Jim Tanner and Mason Ashe. I want to thank Odell McCants for being our moderator tonight. But Jim and Mason, I'm honored that we have the relationship that we have. And I'm really, really excited. I've been excited about this program, this series that we put together. And then tonight it came to fruition. And again, you guys are big time players and you never miss a shot. And you came out here and you shared your knowledge and your time and you were authentic. And I have a special group. This group of people that come every Thursday since April have been a tremendous group. And I call them a tribe because they reflect the vibe that we have. And our mission here is to create, impact as many lives as we possibly can through the platform that we have as professionals to create living trophies. We all want to win trophies. We all have won trophies, but they sit in a trophy case or they hang on a wall. But when you impact lives and you're the ladle that pours into people that we serve, then they become our living trophies. So I just want to thank you both for coming on, tonight and being as authentic as you are and sharing your knowledge, more importantly, sharing your time. And if there's anything that I can ever do for you, please don't hesitate and let's continue to stay connected. And I always leave with a last word or quote. And today it comes from Thurgood Marshall. In recognizing the humanity of our fellow beings, we pay ourselves the highest tribute. And then I want to leave you with this. Become the CEO of your mindset. Your life is no better than the relationship you have with your mind. So continue to be educated, continue to be empowered, and continue to evolve. Jim Tanner, Mason Ashe, my brothers, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on. And just really happy. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Pleasure and honor.
Thanks,
Coach.
Thank you, guys.
Be blessed.
Blessed.
Thank you very much.